Ovechkin's Hart finish and Logan Thompson's Vezina rise next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the situation surrounding Alex Alexeyev. Listen, it is not something that the Capitals really want to talk about, as Alex Alexeyev, if you can recall, was involved in that drunken altercation. What is the latest with Alexeyev? I'll talk about that. A bit later, I'll talk about Logan Thompson's Vezina surge. For a lion's share of the season, he was in the front runnings to be the Vezina winner. But Connor Hellebuyck rose supreme in that category. But what did we learn about Logan Thompson and how key was he in the Capitals' success? But just to get it going here, we're going to talk about Ovechkin's remarkable season. And I'll talk about where he came in the Hart voting, but not even the Hart voting. If we can just recall for a moment here what kind of bounce back season he had. And, it's interesting to talk about Alex Ovechkin, the greatest goal scorer of all time. Yes, we can say that now, the greatest goal scorer. For the longest time, he was chasing down Gretzky, and can he do it this season and next season? And he's he's one of the best goal scorers, but right now we can officially say that Ovechkin is the greatest goal scorer of all time. So that, is quite an accomplishment in and of itself. That Gretzky record seemed like something that was untouchable, that there's not a player out there that could ever touch that record. But he did that. He was able to catch and pass Gretzky under his current contract. So quite an accomplishment. And I guess that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a bounce back season. Because if we can rewind time to just last season, when he got off to that slowest start in his entire career, put up 9 goals at the All-Star break, went over to Dubai, rode around on a camel, and just was a man on a mission when he returned after the All-Star break. So for me, as someone that covers this team, there was some kind of question about what kind of Alex Ovechkin were we going to see this past season. And what are some of the things that we learned is, being 39 years old right now, that he had to modify his training regimen a little bit. He can't hit it the same way that he did when he was, say, 27 years old. But what we saw from Alex Ovechkin this past season defied odds, defied expectations, because you expect to see a certain amount of depreciation in play over time. In day-to-day life, 39 years old isn't that old, but in professional terms, in hockey terms, 39, well, it's getting up there. And what we saw from Alex Ovechkin was no dip in production. So let's dive into that in segment number 1 here. And let's start with Alex Ovechkin in this episode. And how about finishing 8th in Hart Trophy voting at the age of 39? That's quite an accomplishment to even be in the conversation. It's ridiculous. I mean, let's take a second to appreciate what he did in year number 20. And I recounted some of those many things that he did. And, a lot of questions, I guess, about the future of Alex Ovechkin and the Capitals, but talk about just knocking it out of the park. What he did this last season, if you want to take a look at the back of his hockey card, he had 44 goals, 73 points in just 65 games. And, in everything that happened, I think sometimes it's easy to forget about what happened, that whole hit, that lower leg hit on Jack McBain from the Utah Hockey Club, now the Mammoth. Ovi broke his leg in November, if you can remember that, in a broken leg. And he still led the team in goals, in shots, in points per game, power play goals, all of it. And he broke Gretzky's record along the way. Like what more can we say about Alex Ovechkin other than he just continues to keep knocking it out of the park? And he got a first place vote. I'm talking in the Hart Trophy voting. Yeah, there was one out there that looked at his season and said that's the most valuable player in the NHL. I think it's not too hard to guess on who that GM that voted for that. He also got a second place vote, 4 fourth place votes, and 15 fifths, 8th overall. Fitting, honestly, if you take a look at it, that, the players that are out there that were ahead of him in voting. But, when you take a look at Ovechkin, it's not the kind of thing that you normally think of, that, when you're in your 39th year on this planet and, playing 20 years of hockey, that you're still going to get that kind of production. But Alex Ovechkin has done just that. And I think, that Alex Ovechkin still has a lot to prove. That he does have 1 year left under contract. In a lot of ways, he has, crossed off a lot of the things that he has wanted to take care of. But I still think that there's more that he wants to prove. And what is one of the biggest thing that stands out? Some people are saying, he's chasing down 1,000 goals, and that might be the case. But I still think something that burns inside of him is something that you saw, especially in round 1 against the Canadiens, is he still wants to win another cup with his team. He was able to do the unthinkable thing, or the unthinkable thing at the time, and win one in 2018. He has 1 year left, and I think that if Chris Patrick can build a good supporting cast around him, I think it is definitely possible, because if we take a look at the Capitals this past season, they seemed infallible, bulletproof. That was, a title or a thumbnail title for a couple of my podcasts, bulletproof, untouchable, that it seemed like this team could do no wrong. And that was due in large part to the great play of the captain of your Capitals, Alex Ovechkin. Continues to light it up, and why I'm enthusiastic and have high expectations going into next season. But talking about what he did for the Hart went to Connor Hellebuck. We'll get to him soon here, but this just adds to the legacy of Ovechkin. The only Cap to ever win the Hart, and he's done it 3 times already. This wasn't a sentimental vote. He earned it. So quite an accomplishment for Alex Ovechkin, and oftentimes, we'll talk about the goal record, and what he was able to put up, but it's a lot more than that. It's all these different accomplishments. We're talking the Hart, we're talking winning the Cup, and all the other awards that he's won from here to there. So to think that Alex Ovechkin is going to, end his season, or his career rather, in a whimper, I don't think that's going to be the case. What happens after next season, I guess we ultimately don't know. But what we know for right now is Alex Ovechkin at 39, going into his 40th year on this planet, going into next season, I don't see any dip in his production. I just see him getting better and better. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Logan Thompson and being one of the front runners for a lion's share of the season for Vezina voting. I'll talk about him straight ahead. Ever check your banking account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Now that's something that I've worked on with my wife, is budgeting money, how you don't go out to eat so much, and how you try not to spend frivolously. And you know what's cool about Monarch Money is it is one suite that makes it easy to control your spending and monitoring it, especially if you have a significant other in your life. It makes it that much easier. Now, when I started using Monarch, I realized how much money I was spending on going out and food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in segment 2, we're talking about Logan Thompson and just kind of the bounce back season. That's kind of a theme here. It's funny in segment 2 or in segment 1, I talked about Ovechkin and a bounce back in a different kind of way. Logan Thompson had a change of team that we know that the Capitals traded for and acquired Logan Thompson last summer. And it was an interesting deal. As we know, Darcy Kemper, who was supposed to be the goaltender of the future for the Capitals, the long-term future, well, he didn't really fit in Washington, so he got traded out to LA in a deal that sent Pierre-Luc Dubois to the Capitals. So my feeling was that Charlie Lindgren was going to be the starter. Maybe you were thinking the same thing as well, and maybe Hunter Shepard would back him up. But one of the things that Brian McClellan did last summer was he had the ability to look at the team and said, that's kind of an unproven tandem. We know that Charlie Lindgren was good, in sample sizes, and the season before he was instrumental in the Capitals making it to the first round of the playoffs, subsequently fanned out against the Rangers. But when you take a look at him, it's important to look at track records, and Charlie Lindgren was unproven. And Hunter Shepard, well, he was really good at the American League level, knocked it out at the college level, but not proven at the NHL level. So BMAC had the ability to take a look at this team at a 30,000-foot view and go, that's a bit of a question mark. I'm not so sure that tandem is going to make us compete against some of the best teams out in the NHL. So what did he do? Well, he took a flyer on Logan Thompson, and he was netminder number 1. But that isn't how we went into the season. It was a battle of who was going to be number 1. Think 1A and 1B, Charlie Lindgren being 1B, ostensibly. But Logan Thompson, kind of ran away with it. But the secret sauce for the Capitals the past season was alternating. It would be Logan Thompson, and then it would be Charlie Lindgren, and then towards the latter part of the season, Logan Thompson kind of ran away with it. But then there was the injuries, those kind of things where you needed a solid Charlie Lindgren in the mix. So it's a good thing that the Capitals did have options, and Logan Thompson, a little bit bitter, I guess, at the end of the day with the Vegas Golden Knights, that he didn't feel like he got enough credit playing in Vegas. That, in a lot of ways the coaches said that it wasn't really the net minding that did it. It was the Golden Knights' stout defense. So Logan Thompson came here with a chip on his shoulder, willing to prove to the NHL that, no, I do have a lot of talent, and if I'm dialed in, I can really be a game changer for a team. And he was absolutely that for the Capitals because, Charlie Lindgren's good. And I'm not saying the Capitals would not have made it to the playoffs, but I'm going to say that Logan Thompson made it that much easier. In any event, if you want to look at it as a 1A, 1B, Logan Thompson, Charlie Lindgren, well, that was the secret sauce or part of the secret sauce of the Capitals' success. So let's dive into that in segment number 2 here, talking about Logan Thompson and ultimately what he meant for this team. Because Logan Thompson almost crashed the Vezina party this year, finishing 4th in voting. Not bad for a guy who was a question mark heading into his first season in D.C. And, you want to take a look at it. There were some questionable things about Logan Thompson as well. Getting knocked out of the game, saying he got his bell rung, just different things like that where, anyway, I don't want to dive into what people are saying, but some people are kind of questioning about the validity of some of his injuries. But Thompson had, let me grab this real quick here, had a 31-6-6 record, a 2.49 goals against average, and a 9-10 save percentage. So, you take a look at him, the big question mark, or that's what people were saying for the Capitals, solid numbers, But what really turned heads was his goals saved above expected. Per Money Puck, Thompson had a 26.0 goals saved above expected. Third best in the league, only behind Connor Hellebuyck and Andrei Vasilevsky. That is elite territory. So quite something what he was able to do in his first season with the Capitals. And, it's interesting talking about, and I'll talk about here in a minute, is, there was some question about the Capitals in the net-minding department, which goaltender was going to get the extension, as we know that Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson were due for new deals. Now the Caps clearly liked what they saw here. They gave him a 6-year, $35.1 million extension back in January. And at 28 years old, he might just be the long-term answer in goal. And that's, some people, and, me to a certain extent as well, 6 years. Well, that is a big bite out of the Logan Thompson apple. And, sometimes you definitely see a depreciation in net minding. And, how is Logan Thompson going to be in year 4, year 5 of that deal? The way you look at it, that is just the way the NHL is structured right now. You got to think that Logan Thompson and his representation were going for term and money. And they got both of those things that if you lowballed them, well, Logan Thompson could have tried to go to a different team, because there are teams out there that could definitely use a Logan Thompson. So despite what you think about term and the amount of money, that is what they had to do. Now, remember, this guy had never posted more than a 4.6 gold save above in any other years in Vegas. So a huge jump in performance. So the question is what changed for Logan Thompson? Why was he able to do what he was able to do? Well, I guess the biggest thing is it's a different team, different systems, and different players around him. And don't let Logan Thompson hear this, but the blue liners that played around him, they helped him out a lot. And I think that oftentimes teams play more confidently if they have a really great netminder in net, and they know that there's a pretty good chance that if Logan Thompson is between the pipes, that he's going to stop things that the blue liners cannot stop. And I think that if your team is playing confidently with a great netminder, that leads to more scoring opportunities where you're not worried about, is this guy between the pipes going to save it, or am I going to have to just spend all my time trying to help him out? So that was big there. But let's transition to the man himself, Hellebuyck. The award itself went to Hellebuyck, who honestly had an historic year. 47 wins and a 2.00 goals against average, a .925 save percentage, 8 shutouts. He also won the Hart, just a ridiculous run. And it's interesting, Connor Hellebuyck, who was lights out during the regular season, well, there were some question marks in the playoffs. So, what I've said before is true, and I'm not the first one to say it, that oftentimes teams have a different gear when you make it to the playoffs. And that was especially true for Connor Hellebuyck, as, again, lights out, infallible, bulletproof for a lion's share of the season. But then he struggled a little bit in the playoffs. So that's interesting. But Hellebuyck is now in that Vezina Elite Club. 3-time winner under the modern format. That's Hasek, Brodeur, Waugh, and now Hellebuyck. So, this is a Capitals podcast, but I think it's important to tip the hat there to the guys that have done a good job. Logan Thompson, one of the finalists in the mix, but ultimately it was Hellebuyck. Much deserved, I think. I just think that Logan Thompson is, going to continue to get better and better. I guess it remains to be seen. But all things considered, very deserving of Connor Hellebuyck to win that award. But I don't think Logan Thompson should feel too bad about anything. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about the Alexeyev situation. Now, listen, I try to keep this pretty much a hockey podcast. I don't like to dig into, the gossip, if you will. But being that it was kind of a serious situation, and a current Capitals player on the roster, that's what I'll dive into. I'll talk about the latest with Alexeyev straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. All right, in the final segment 3 here, we're talking about the Alexeyev situation. And before I dive into that, let's just talk about what the Capitals should do in the long term for Alex Alexeyev. He is the guy that it was always supposed to be his year. And, to be clear here, he spent most of this past season in the cryogenic deep freeze, and, injury came. Marty Faravari got injured, not optimal, as Martin Faravari was, a key contributor, one of the biggest pieces on the Capitals' blue line that when emergency came knocking and they had to break the glass and pull out an emergency piece, it was Alex Alexeyev. A bit lackluster, not horrible, but I don't think ultimately what the Capitals are looking for. So there's already some question marks surrounding Alex Alexeyev. So the activity that took place shortly after the end of the season, that definitely does not put him in the good graces of the Capitals organization, in my opinion. So let's shift gears here. This one is a little heavier and kind of complicated. If you remember, Alexeyev, the 25-year-old, 25 years old already for the Capitals, was arrested back on May 17th. According to reports and court records, it was for public intoxication. If you don't know, apparently he was involved in a fight outside Big Tony's Pizzeria. Cops saw him assaulting another man. They used pepper spray to break it up, and he was taken into custody. And not the good optics. And, the one thing I know about the Capitals is they don't like these kind of situations, this negativity surrounding the organization. We've seen this before with different prospects and that kind of thing. So the optics on this don't look great. That's why off the top I was kind of just trying to give you the lay of the land about the player. And then you add this public intoxication into the mix. That does not look too good. But as far as Alexeyev, and this is just my take on it, is he didn't get any jail time or anything like that. This case was settled with a deferred disposition, basically meaning he pays a $91 fine. And if it goes away and if he stays clean, but not exactly a great look for a player trying to earn a contract. So you take a look at it, talk about, good legal representation, a $91 fine. For the police having to show up and use pepper spray on him. Now, to be clear here, I don't know what happened there. Maybe the guy was talking smack to someone that he was friends with or his significant other. I don't know the situation. And even if he was, I guess that's probably not the proper way to handle a situation. But when you add alcohol to the mix, everything changes. And ultimately, like I said, the optics of it are not good for Alexeyev. His play in and of itself, not horrible, but not, kind of what we had hoped for. So definitely some murky, troubled waters for Alexeyev ahead. Now, here's the other part. Alexeyev was barely part of the regular season. He played just 8 games. He was a healthy scratch for most of it, but then he gets thrown into the playoff lineup when Marty Faravari goes out, like I said, and he actually played all 9 postseason games. And that's one of the things I spoke about, that the Capitals did not do a lot on the trade deadline. As we know that they traded for Beauvillier, and that was it, because they didn't want to mess up the team chemistry. They didn't want to do this in the locker room and the vibes and all this. That it was really apparent. It was real apparent to me anyway that when Marty Faravari, it would have been good if they had maybe a bit more of a grizzled old vet, a proven performer, a guy that could be in the cupboard, because we knew the Capitals were headed for the playoffs. That it would have been good if they would have had someone good to go, because the thing around the Capitals for the longest time is that there's just a glut of talent. There's Chase Prisky and Vinny Iorio, but when it really hit the fan, that's who they called upon. Not Dylan McElrath, who, by his own admission, is not the quickest skater, and Ethan Bear, who played good at the American League level the season before. A lot of fanfare, a lot of excitement, did not live up to expectations. So definitely something I think the Capitals need to do this offseason. I don't think that the whole John Carlson thing, that's an conversation for another time. What is the long-term future there? But, not talking John Carlson, I think the Capitals definitely need to have a proven performer if things go awry. Again, not optimal timing, and I know it's not Marty Fehervary's fault, but when things went poorly, that's who they called upon, was Alex Alexeyev. And, again, didn't really live up to what I had hoped for. But current GM Chris Patrick said during breakdown day that they hope Alexeyev gets more playing time. But here's the thing. He's a restricted free agent now with arbitration rights, so the Caps have to decide whether they even want to qualify him. Hit me up on Twitter or on YouTube. Is he even worth qualifying? Asking me. He's just never been the guy I think the Capitals are hoping for. This is one of these subtle off-season decisions that may not make the headlines, but could impact the blue line depth down the road. Again, we have some players down in Hershey that are supposed to be the future faces, but supposed to is the word that you want to circle there. We don't know if they're going to live up to expectation, but as far as Alexeyev is concerned, having a poor season and maybe he was taking out some stress. Again, I wasn't there. There's not a lot of descriptions about exactly what led to the altercation, but in any event, that is not how you conduct yourself when you are under current contract with a professional hockey team. That is kind of on the bubble. I mean, the Capitals could go either way, right? I think that, he wasn't in the good graces before, just based on performance in his history. That definitely did not help his case. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.